one thing I have to credit myself with is I try my best to not get hung up on things that I might be afraid of doing. So I usually just take a deep breath and just try and see what happens. And it usually works in my favor.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen today. My name is Michael T. Johnson. I'm here with my co-host, Tyler Kelly, and we are in Venture Cafe, Miami. Venture Cafe is the #1 Thursday night gathering of innovators anywhere in the world. So today we're very, very excited because we have Mikhaile Solomon with us.
Hi, Michael. Hi, Tyler.
Welcome. Yeah. So a little bit about Mikhaile. She was born and raised in Miami, and she's of Caribbean heritage. She's a graduate of FIU, the graduate program in architecture, and she completed her undergraduate degree in theater arts at the University of South Florida. Just a few years ago, you founded and you're currently the director of the Prism Art Fair. And for those of you who don't know, that's an art fair that expands the spectrum of exhibiting international artists from global African diaspora and emerging markets. It's a pretty cool thing that you have going on, and it's pretty exciting. So we're going to talk a lot about art, a lot about local art and international art, and it's going to be a great show. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you and Michael, and I think what you guys are doing to kind of shine a light on innovative folks in the country and possibly globally as well. I think that's a real asset to our viewers, and I hope they get a lot out of your platform.
And it's kind of what you're doing in a similar mission, but just like in the artistic world, to kind of showcase some of those artists that maybe aren't being seen here in Miami. So tell us just a little bit about that.
So I started Prism Art Fair. I kind of grew up in a space where I was encouraged to kind of explore my creativity. I dabbled in many different forms of art. I took painting courses, my master's in architecture. I had my undergraduate degree in theater. I was a ballerina. I was a pianist. So in many ways, I was always a part of an artistic ecosystem. And so, I would, of course, visit Art Basel and many art fairs. And I was always a little bit, taken aback that I wasn't seeing a lot of diversity presented in those spaces, both content-wise and the actual artists themselves that are represented by art galleries and in that space. And so for me, I was just really looking for content that kind of spoke to my own personal narrative. And so because I didn't see it there, I was like, well, why doesn't something like this exist? Why don't I just take it upon myself to kind of use my own, project management skills, my own creativity to build a platform, and also kind of galvanize the relationships that I do have with a lot of artists here in Miami to create a world-class venue that presents the best in emerging and established contemporary artists from the African diaspora. And that was also part of many of the conversations that I was having locally with artists. They were like, well, we don't really, we're not represented by art galleries, so we don't really know how we would be able to exhibit our work in this kind of like world-class event that happens in Miami every year. So I just said, okay, well, let's do this, and we did it, and it's a part of our mission and an imperative for us to include artists from Miami in our art fair every year. So you have artists from Miami who are exhibiting with established artists. We last year we had an artist who's originally from Miami, but he's sort of exploded in reputation, and his work is doing so well. He's a professor at Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. His name is Didier William, and he's of Haitian heritage, born and raised here in Miami. But to have other artists from Miami showing their work alongside his was, of course, an honor for, you know, a lot of the other artists who were exhibiting in the art fair. And then aside from that, we also present scholars and academicians who basically have studied visual arts in a scholarly fashion for years and have written papers and books about the practices of many of the artists who exhibit at our fair. So, you know, we sort of think of Prism as a catalytic platform for the upward trajectory of many emerging artists that exhibit with us. Many artists that exhibit with us go on to have museum shows and eventually do get represented by art galleries, or they then, you know, themselves just start having, gaining more interest from art collectors. So we really kind of pride on ourselves on being a place where you can go to get the best artwork from this particular ethnic narrative space. Yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm curious, like, as you're talking, a lot of art and galleries, like, why is it that we have that problem? Because you would think, like, using Art Basel as just the example, that Miami's a very diverse place. You would think that something here would have a lot of that diversity reflected. But why is this an issue that we see just in art in general everywhere?
I mean that becomes like a very complicated conversation, because, you know, I think in general the art world is kind of set up by a very westernized canon, and in many ways, if you don't sort of fit within like the westernized canon, they, at least initially, they were excluding a lot of voices that didn't fit within like the European standard of artistic practice.
Yeah.
But you know, and you know, there's been a lot of debates about, you know, like even Picasso, his work was inspired by works by his many trips that he took to Africa, and he was inspired by a lot of the art making in that space. But there is a lot of revisionism that's happening now, where authors and academicians now are looking back at history, art history, and kind of filling in gaps where scholars before were not as inclusive. And really there's a lot more attention paid to, you know, as a result of initiatives like Prism and, you know, other scholars in this space who want to see more of this. They're sort of taking the bulls by the horns on their own and saying, you know, we need to create a space where we can start exhibiting en masse a lot more artists than we did before. But I think that has a lot to do with it. The arts ecosystem was built mostly on a very European westernized canon, and now that's being challenged, and we're being challenged to sort of look at everything from a more diverse perspective.
I mean, that makes sense, because, I mean, from my education, that's generally what we spent our focus on, was those sorts of things. And I think anything else was just a very small part of the curriculum. So along those lines, besides what you're talking about, like getting other voices into art, is what you're talking about, getting kind of other things into that canon, part of your goal and your mission as well?
Yes. So part of our tagline was African Diaspora and Emerging Markets. So emerging markets includes any space within, you know, the global artistic conversation where the narratives there are still kind of on the rise. So, for instance, last year at our art fair, as a part of our curated fair, what we did was we also included artists from Iran. We worked with an organization that works with the Iranian diaspora, and we particularly we had our own like social commentary reasons for doing that, because we have an administration that's sort of like can be exclusionary in this conversation about certain ethnic groups. And so we wanted to be very clear that we were inclusive of everybody. There's wonderful people everywhere, and we wanted to make sure that the arts practices that were exhibited at Prism were representative of people from all spaces. And so we had a very clear directive to, we had artists from Mexico, we had artists from the Dominican Republic, from regions of the world that are largely Muslim. And so, and then we had healthy dialogues. The work was also paired with conversations by scholars. We have a platform called Prism Panels where we invite scholars to come talk about artistic practice and their work. So we do our best to not just show artwork, but make sure that the entire experience is rooted in kind of challenging convention and getting our patrons and our visitors to really think differently and change their perspectives on things.
Yeah. So that sounds, from what you're saying, it's not just about art itself, but it's about changing like a huge narrative of even history as we know it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. So take me back to where you had the idea or the inspiration to start this. Where did that all come from?
I have a background in architecture. I was working on another project here in Miami that was similar in scope. We worked with a lot of African American artists, African Diaspora artists. And after working on that project, I was like, I really enjoyed this, and at the time I was just, a lot of graduates in 2011, around that time, that was like post-recession, we were all scrambling trying to figure out which firm we were going to work for, where we were going to find jobs. And so I just kind of dabbled, and I met my former colleague at the time, and we were having conversations about art, and I said I would work with him on what he was doing. But then after that relationship was over, I was like, I really enjoyed that experience and I got a lot out of it. And I think it was the first time in my life I'd worked on something and was like, I really love this. And I've been in love with it ever since. And I just kind of took it upon myself to keep on going. And 5 years later, it's like this thing that's sort of taken over my life in a good way. So that's kind of how it began. It began in a place where I just didn't know what I was doing, and I was sort of trial and error, and I kind of fell into it. Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So what's your day-to-day look like? I mean, I know in December it's probably insane, but like what's the rest of the year look like?
So the rest of the year is a lot of organizational planning, meeting with potential partners, sponsors, raising money, writing grants, traveling to meet with artists, a lot of studio visits. Artwork is something you always have to see in person. Pictures just never do artwork justice. So as much as I can, I try to travel and meet with artists. I talk with artists. I meet with scholars at universities. I try to meet with authors of books, particularly art books. It's a lot of just trying to curate the experience throughout the year. I always co-curate Prism with additional curators. So we also think of Prism not just as an art fair specifically for visual arts, but just like the scholarship around visual arts as well. So we invite emerging curators as well. So and established curators as well. So for the past 2 years, I was working with he's an artist, but he also is a curator. His name is William Cordova. He's local. He's of Peruvian ancestry, but he also works with a swath of amazing African American and African diaspora artists. So we work very well together, and we kind of have a similar working style. We're just like we get into the weeds of things and we just kind of like give everything a go. So working with him has been a real joy, and he has an amazing wealth of knowledge of art history, social justice practice. So it's just a good working relationship. And then this year we're going to be working along with him again, another curator that's based in Chicago, but she graduated from FIU. Her name is Jeffreen Hayes, and she runs a nonprofit in Chicago called 3 Walls. They do a lot of public art projects in Chicago's urban landscape. So that's another, cornerstone of Prism's experience. I think, did I answer the question?
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
What are your biggest challenges that you're facing in trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish with Prism?
I think funding arts projects are always difficult because it requires that you just kind of know, you have to have the right relationships. It's a very relationship-driven industry. And so if you don't have those relationships, and mind you, I think for the most part, we've been very, very fortunate that we've built the relationships that we do have. Like the Knight Foundation has been an amazing support to us. The Green Family Foundation has been amazing. They've been with us since 2014, which was our second year of the fair. They came to our fair the first year and they're like, we really love this. And they've been with us like even till now. Like my office is based in their office. So they've been incredibly supportive of our initiative. But an arts project or an art fair of this size, last year we had 120 artists. That always requires, a meaty budget.
Yeah. So
just making sure that we have the budget to support what we want to do, and at the scale we want to do it, to really add to the narrative in a way that is a positive reflection of the artists that participate, that requires, a lot of funding. And so just, consistently going after funding, sometimes that can be challenging because you have to be innovative. And of course, I think I've thought about 110 ways to get funding to support the initiative. But it's also a good exercise for me because I can't because in many ways I'm an artist as well. So it forces me to sort of use a different side of my brain that I'm not born and bred to use. Mm-hmm. So I've had to cultivate skill sets that I otherwise wouldn't normally easily fall into, which I think I kind of just think of it as a blessing that this opportunity has allowed me to kind of operate outside of my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting discussion or challenge because it's the same challenge that artists face. Mm-hmm. The business challenge, really. Right. How do you get paid? So you said earlier that this is something that in 2013 you basically just followed your passion and created something that didn't exist. So where did you start in terms of like when it was time to actually start bringing in some financing? So how'd you start?
So how did I start this? Well, I knew about grants, right? And I was terrified because I'd never written a grant before. I mean, I'm a decent writer. So one thing I have to credit myself with is I try my best to not get hung up on things that I might be afraid of doing. So I usually just take a deep breath and just try and see what happens. And it usually works in my favor. So that's kind of how I did it. Some of the other projects that I worked on were good practice for me. So in the past, I wrote grants for other organizations and they were funded. So it sort of gave me the motivation to try to do something like that for myself and for something that I believed in. And now I do it all the time. Now I look all over the internet and I scour for opportunities to write grants. And then in addition to that, I also think of other ways to raise money. So how do I leverage the database that we have accumulated from people that come to the fair? Because over the past couple of years, thousands of people have come to the art fair. So that in of itself that's our network of folks that love what we do and want to support us. And we have been able to, to cultivate relationships with people who've come to the fair. That usually helps too. Sometimes I have conversations with people who've come to the fair. They ask me how they can help, and it's just a simple conversation. I really enjoyed I actually onboarded several board members that way. So we have 9. Last year we assembled our board for the first time, and I took my time doing that because a board is like a hugely important part of the growth of any organization. So I spent the prior years just kind of really meeting people, seeing what the vibe between myself and several people were like, to make sure that they were the right fit and that they were as committed to the mission of Prism as I was. And I'm very fortunate to have the team that I do have. And many of them are my board members now because they came to Prism and they loved it, and they said, how can I help? And I was like, well, you can help by joining my board. And they're like, I'd be happy to. So that's kind of how I started. I started by just trying the grant thing, and we had little grants initially. We had like maybe $2,000, $5,000 grants, and then eventually we got bigger grants. And so now I'm trying to get bigger grants, and we were even thinking about venture capital now, and how Prism might be a candidate for that space as well.
I mean, I think it probably fits like in the social impact space, but that's just me.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears and just talk about art. And put you on the spot. Like, what 3 artists right now are you just super excited about? And why, obviously.
Oh, man, don't do that to me. Okay.
You don't have to limit it to 3 if you can.
Yeah, okay. So there's an artist in Washington, D.C. named Wesley Clark.
Okay.
And I love because I'm an architect, right? So I love anything that is that shows craftsmanship and has like a very structured, built, a mastery of material in such a way that it's a built thing, a built object. And he's just masterful at that. He does these really amazing wood carved pieces. He had a piece at Prism called My Big Black America, that was a big map of the United States, and it was made up of all of these found objects that you would assume are just a part of the fabric of this country, and the whole thing was painted black. It was a huge monumental piece, 16 feet wide, 10 feet tall. So he's one. I'm going to mention a woman artist now. Ndejeka Akunyili Crosby. She's Nigerian. And she's a collage artist. And most of her works are illustrative of the narrative between her and her husband. Her husband, I believe, is, I want to say Jewish, and she's Nigerian. And so the work always kind of talks about the intersection between her cultural heritage and his cultural heritage, how they mesh. There's one piece, and and the way the work is assembled is just so masterful. And I think she curates different not fabrics, but like papers that have like African print on it, and newspapers and all sorts of paper materials, and she brings them together in just a really amazing way that kind of shows where her heritage begins and ends, and where her husband's heritage begins and ends, and where they meet. So she does it through the materials and through the actual narrative of the pieces. So I love her work for that reason. And then another artist, I feel like I'm blanking because there's another artist. He's pretty well, at this point everybody knows who he is, but his name is Hank Willis Thomas, and he does a lot of very strong social commentary pieces. He examines advertising from like back in the 1960s and the 1970s, and shows them to you in a way where you can see that there was serious discrepancies in the way the content was being presented to people at the time. So he would show like Marlboro or cigarette ads where the lettering was taken away, and then you could actually see what just the person. You're like, oh, this is actually shocking. So he would kind of like deconstruct advertising pieces and really make the viewer see the actual content of the work. So yeah, he's another one whose work I really enjoy. I could go on if you want me to.
Um,
What do you look for, like for the fair specifically? What are you looking for in the artists that you feature?
I'm looking for artists who are like not afraid to push convention and not afraid to challenge the status quo in their work. Because the art world also has like these barriers and things like that for me, I don't care, you know. And I just want artists who are like speaking honestly to what's happening in this day and age. So for instance, there was a piece by an artist named Larry Cook. He's from Washington. Is he? Yeah, Washington D.C. Yeah, D.C., Maryland area. And he presented a check that for like $3 trillion, and it was a reparations check that the U.S. Department of Treasury gave to African Americans. And I was like, oh, well, yes, we would like that, please. So like work that's kind of like true to and really calls out things that are happening. I enjoy them. They're kind of like this kind of tongue-in-cheek way of dealing with issues and making people kind of confront our issues. And that was a work that a lot of people like. It was posted all over social media because people just really liked it. And then there's another artist, and I can't neglect to mention her because Michelle Obama loved her, and she did the portrait of Michelle Obama. Her name is Amy Sherald, and she's out of Baltimore, and she always does really beautiful portraits of African American people in a sort of monochromatic palette, and the coloration of the skin is always kind of like a grayish monochromatic color, but then she has like a vibrant color in the background, and the clothes sort of wake up the imagery. So she's another artist I really appreciate as well.
So Miami, for many, is like art central, right? So like there's a lot happening here. So when it comes to Miami artists, who are your favorites? Or who should we be on the lookout for? Let's put it that way.
So there's a fantastic artist. I've had the pleasure of working with him for quite a while. His name is T. Elliott Mansa. He's from Miami Gardens. He started as largely doing portraiture, like sort of like abstract. Well, not really abstract. It's clearly portraiture. And now he's moving more into like assemblage and mixed media work. He's doing his MFA at Hunter College. And so he's an extraordinary, he's one of my favorite artists in Miami and at large, pretty much. Another artist that I really admire locally, there's a young man named Terrence Price. He's doing a lot of like documentary video work of urban cores in Miami, like Liberty City, and he does documentary work of Overtown. So he's another artist. We had his work and T's work at Prism last year. Another one I really enjoy is I'm blanking. Njide Shabaka, and he's like a veteran in Miami arts. He's been He's been practicing, I want to say, for well over 30 years. There's another artist named Gary Moore. You can actually see his work at the Adrian Art Center. You walk on it because it's a hardscape on the ground. Lonnie Johnson, she's an arts educator, but she does a lot of artwork that's focused on femininity from a Black woman's point of view. Morel Doucette, he's a fantastic ceramicist, like one of my favorite ceramicists. And his studio is based in the Little Haiti community. He's a teaching, he began as a teaching artist at Perez Art Museum, and now he's at ICA. So yeah, I think those are some of my Miami local favorites.
Those are some good choices. I've always wanted to ask this question for the people that haven't started buying art yet, but they enjoy it, and they, it evokes a feeling, but it might just be, unapproachable. Like, they just don't see themselves as being like people that would buy art. You know what I mean? How do people get started buying art?
So that's exactly what Prizm is about.
Yeah.
Like Prizm, so when you go to Art Basel, it's incredibly intimidating because you're looking at works that begin at the bare minimum at $5,000. But that's not, like, you could buy work at Prizm for $200, and they're good quality. Like, you can buy good quality prints. You can buy smaller works that are $200, but these are works from like well vetted, high quality artists. So that's what we do. Our focus is to creating an experience that is approachable to anybody at any socioeconomic space. You can find a price point at Prizm that you're comfortable with, and then also another thing to consider is that you don't have to buy everything outright. You can make payments on artwork. There's this like strange belief that you're supposed to drop a couple million like right there straight away, and it doesn't work that way. You can pay things off. That's actually, these are the kind of conversations we like to have at Prizm. So like some of our panel discussions, we address these things. We're going to do a lot of that this year at our art fair, is talking about how to collect art if you're someone who wants to do it. So that was something that was great about our fair last year. We had several buyers last year who were brand new to art buying, and that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure they felt comfortable with their purchases, that they love their work. We don't want people just to buy because it's an investment. We want you to actually like the work. And a part of collecting artwork is sort of thinking about how the narrative that you want to build a collection with. So there's a number of collections. I don't know if you noticed, in Miami there's several art collections here. We have the De La Cruz collection, the Cisneros collection. A lot of the developers have their own, like George Perez has his own collection, but they work with curators, and I think George Perez has a very Latin focused collection. Cisneros has a very Latin artist focused, and the De La Cruz collection. So you kind of just think about what is important to you, and you can develop a whole entire collection around those ideas.
If somebody wants to get involved with what you're doing through Prizm, or somebody wants to start exploring being a part of that world, like, what should they do? Where should they start?
They could just email me. They can email me at Mikhaile, which is MIKHAILE at Prizm. That's PRIZ as in zebra, M as in Mary, artfair.com. We always have a period, which actually starts now, between now and the end of July, where we take submissions from all over, artists from all over the world, really. And we have myself and the co-curators actually sift through the large number of submissions we get. I think last year we had like 300 submissions.
Wow.
And then we curate the experience from there.
For about 120.
Yeah, last year we had 120, and I think that was too many.
Okay.
So I think this year we'll probably whittle it down to about 80. 80 tops.
Do they all come by way of submission, or is there a select group that you invite?
So sometimes I just invite artists. A lot of times, like on a daily basis, I'm looking at art magazines and just scouring the interwebs to find, and I stumble upon things. So like I have notes on folks that I want to sort of follow up with and inquire about. So it's a combination of invitation and submissions.
All right, so this has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
Tell people where you are on social, Prism, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So we're all over social media.
Okay.
So you could find us on Facebook at Prism Art Fair. You can find me on Facebook at Mikhaile Solomon. We're on Instagram at Prism Art Fair, at Mikhaile Solomon. Twitter, same thing, at Prism Art Fair, at Mikhaile Solomon. You can find me on LinkedIn. And you can also find Prism Art Fair on LinkedIn as well. And you can even find us on Pinterest. We're on Pinterest as well. So we kind of just pin, artists' work that we really like, and like create like the whole
The boards.
the boards
that's
and
awesome.
the vibe for what we're about. Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Mikhaile, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us today.
Yeah,
It was
thanks for being on the
likewise.
show.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael and Tyler.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you're in Miami, visit us on Thursday nights. Details are at venturecafemiami.org. And be sure to connect with us on social at We Are Slam and at Venture Cafe MIA. Thanks for listening.
This is where it all begins. So say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win. We come to fly. This is where we make our dreams